Hi, everyone. I'm Sonna Johns on Up Close and Empowered. Welcome back this week on the show. And I just want to thank everybody for listening to the shows and being committed. I really appreciate it. And for those that want to reach out to me, you can reach out to sonnalife.com. That's Sonnalife.com. And I would love to get your feedback. Excuse me. So today I have a very, very special show. And this is a different type of show than I normally do. And it's a first of its kind. And I'm really honored to have the guest here that I have. She's an extraordinary woman with a extraordinary story, very powerful story of transformation. So she is going to talk about a profound experience that she had several years ago and all of the lessons that she's learned on this journey from a near-death experience to a life filled with purpose, freedom, and boundless potential. This has truly been life-changing for our guest today. And her story, I'm really going to let her get into it in just a minute here. And I don't even know the full story. I only know snippets of it. And I was just in awe when I heard what she has gone through. So, this is a show of empowerment. And this woman truly has become very empowered, personally empowered, but not only that, but very courageous, very resilient. And I'm just so glad to have her here on the show. So she is a breakthrough transformational coach. Obviously, she has experience with ND, the near-death experiences, and she is dedicated to guiding individuals through their own paths of evolution. She specializes in redesigning the human wiring to higher levels of consciousness, helping people break free from mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual limitations. So she specifically caters to change-making women around the world. She provides insights, wisdom, and personal strategies for unlocking untapped physical intelligences. And we're going to find out a little bit more about that. Her coaching goes beyond the conventional type coaching, guiding women towards new heights in relationships, health, performance, and purpose-led careers. So I want to welcome her here today. Her name is Jessie Rose, all the way from the UK. This is
Hello,
so cool.
Sonna.
My first international guest. Welcome, Jessie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. And thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Yes, I am so honored to have you here on the show today. So, Jessie, as you know, this is not a story that we hear very often. And I really want our listeners to get an idea of, how this all began. Maybe take us back, a little bit before this incident and just give us an idea of what your life was like before this.
Hey, gosh. Yeah, where to start with that? So I guess growing up, I was very much swept up in the ideas and plans of others. So I wasn't really certain of my identity and who I was, and afraid to be, and find out who I was. And I guess there are a lot of a series of relationships and life circumstances that were quite traumatic. And that combined with hereditary patterns, family patterns and history repeating itself in relationships and health as well. So there was a hereditary weakness with immune system issues in the family down the female line. And I guess everything combined, over a long, long period of time led me to where I was in 2005. And that was fighting for my life in hospital.
Okay, so
Yeah.
before that though, you grew up in tell us where you were, how where you grew up and what was it like because how old were you when this happened?
The actual experience in 2005, I was 28 years old.
Okay, so before that, what was your life like? I want to know like the transition of where you were, what you were going through. Were you in a relationship at the time? What was your life like before this occurrence happened?
So I grew up in the southeast of England, and life was very varied and fun and interesting. A lot of love and a lot of, everything on the other end of the spectrum. And I left home 2 weeks before my 16th birthday. So I was fending and fighting for myself and keeping a roof over my own head and going to college and having a job. And so I began that kind of life early. And I found myself in a long-term relationship. And again, it was the same as previous relationships where I didn't really have my own identity, which is quite sad, and I was swept up in the requirements of others, and never saying no when I needed to say no. And I was told, due to a slight health issue, not to get pregnant and have children. But I was kind of coerced into that despite the risks. I was actually told that it could cost me my life at this current stage before I was completely healed and the situation was completely remedied. So I was living with my partner at the time, and and was coerced into having a child. And there were three miscarriages, and
Wow,
the last one
3.
was, yeah, three, which was very, very sad. I did want to have children anyway, so I was
Okay.
okay, but I had a lot of, worries and concerns about that, and lots of visits to the doctors and consultants to find out if it was okay. And actually, it was a lady who was a homotoxicologist. So she did homeopathy, and she said, no, do not get pregnant. Do not do
Mm.
it.
So
And
they
because she,
knew that you should not be getting pregnant, but were you coerced into
exactly,
getting pregnant? Am I hearing you
I
correctly in
was.
saying that?
Yes, because I was in a relationship where I was trying to leave every 4 to 6 months, and couldn't, due to not having being certain of my own identity or who I was, and not feeling good enough or empowered enough to stand up for myself and be true to myself, and not worthy enough of that, and afraid of what was to follow if I did. So I went along with it at that risk of losing my own life. And
Wow.
sadly, at the last miscarriage, it was 6.5 months, so it was late. And I found out that the baby had died actually a month before because the heart was too big to keep pumping, and I'd actually been carrying her around dead,
Wow.
the
How
whole
old were you
month.
then, Jessie?
28,
Wow.
28 years old. Yeah,
So after you had the third miscarriage, I mean, that must have been very difficult.
it
Like,
was. That was
what was your, I mean,
heartbreaking.
what were you going through? What were you thinking at that time? Like, where was your head at? I'm just so curious. Like, that had to be so difficult.
I was destroyed. I thought, there was something wrong with me. And I thought, everybody's going through a stage in their lives where they're building their lives and building families and creating their dream careers and getting married. And mine was falling apart. So
Hmm.
it kind of compounded the, not feeling good enough, and, not feeling worthy and feeling different. And so I felt like my life was falling apart, really. It was tragic. It was really sad.
Wow. So what happened after that then? After you had this last miscarriage, what was the next thing that happened?
So in the days following, what led me to find out about that was I went quite grey and my energy levels dropped, and something wasn't right, and my tummy dropped. And so I went for a scan in London to go and find out what had happened. And they told me, because the baby starts shrinking and reabsorbing when it dies. And
Hmm.
so in the days following, it was arranged for me to have an emergency D&C to remove the baby. But during that, and that happened, but during that time, I was getting more and more ill. And then after, I think from the D&C to the seventh day after the D&C, I was in severe amounts of pain inside, internally, in all my organs.
Hmm.
And I became so weak, and I lost a hell of a lot of weight. And there were all sorts of gory details that I will spare everybody, but it was utterly horrendous, and there were signs that my body was not coping at all, and I became lifeless. And there just became a moment sitting on the sofa where I just thought, I've got to go to hospital. This isn't okay. And something inside me just knew that I wasn't going to be okay, and perhaps I wasn't going to come out of hospital. So I even rang my dad and left a message to say goodbye and to ring me back. And I phoned, other people in the family. There was just something inside me that just knew things weren't
Wow.
good.
Wow.
Yeah,
So just
yeah,
something told you this was not good and you were already saying goodbyes to people,
yeah,
to your family.
yeah, yeah. And my stomach was getting distended, so I was in a hell of a lot of pain. To walk was agony,
Mhm.
and I was too weak to walk eventually, just in this 7-day period. And when I did go to hospital, and I was very quickly rushed through a system of scans and blood tests and ultrasounds and you name it, I had it done. And they very quickly got me a bed and just said, we don't know how you walked into this hospital because your organs are disintegrating
Mhm.
and they are failing and you are dying. You've got 24 hours to live. And they said the damage is so extensive that there will be no point resuscitating you if you pass. Are you agreed in that? And are you okay with that? And they said I refused any operation at the time because I'd already surrendered to it and I was actually okay with that. So I
Really?
went ahead, yes. So I went ahead and signed the papers to agree not to be resuscitated.
Okay, so you agreed not to be resuscitated. You were going to
Mm,
surrender because you were probably just so weak and exhausted and right? I mean, what was going through your head that you why didn't you want to get the help when they said that they might be able to resuscitate?
because they told me I would have no quality of life. I mean, the damage was so bad. This was even before they had announced the 24 hours, and I would have tubes and you name it everywhere, and
Mhm.
it'd be awful. So I just said no, and then it got to the point where it was too late anyway, and you're going to die 24 hours, and that's it. And then during that night, I had surrendered to that. And during the surrendering of that, I accepted everything. And so I was at peace, really. But
Wow.
during that moment of being in peace, you know, um, they say you look at life and you go through life and life flashes before your eyes. It's not how it happened and not how it happens, I believe. But I did look over my whole life and think, gosh, what led me to this point?
Can you tell us a little
And
bit more in detail, like what that was like in those moments? What did you feel? What did you see? What did you hear? What was that experience like?
it was quite sad, not for myself, but for human suffering, the things we put ourselves through, which are so unnecessary. And if we listen to ourselves in times of trouble and, and knew ourselves more and what makes us function and what makes us tick and what causes us problems and patterns, and, life can be very different and we can be more in charge of ourselves. So I kind of had an empathy for suffering, full stop. But during that process, I was completely in bliss. I was able to revisit certain times in my life and
Wow.
gain complete understanding. That understanding was healing for me. So I went through all the layers of pain in my life to live, is how
Wow.
I see it and how I saw it.
So you were just like when you were laying there, all of this stuff was just coming to you, like all these answers, everything was just unfolding?
In such clarity, without thinking about it. It was just appearing and coming up from my body. There was no other way. I mean, I was just lying there, almost,
That is profound. That is really profound. I mean, think about that. And the fact that it was so clear. How long do you think this went on for? Was it minutes? Was it hours? What was it? Do you remember? Do you know?
If I was to analyze it and look back, I'd say probably about 12 hours.
Wow.
In 12 hours, and during that time, I'd had doctors come and just say your body's leaking out. The reason why you're finding it hard to breathe is because your lungs are filling with fluid and your organs are disintegrating and packing up. And yeah, so but I
Wow.
was absolutely okay with that.
Hmm.
Absolutely okay. But then something happened on the 25th of September in 2005 at 4:25 in the morning, because they took the time and everything, where I completely let go. So I felt no pain, and that's when I had my near-death experience, and I was completely outside of myself. And they say you have a choice, or you're given a choice. Again, I
Hmm.
don't agree with that. That you just have a choice, I believe.
You
I
don't
think
agree with that. You don't.
I don't agree you're given a choice by something or someone. There is a choice.
Okay.
And during that process I went through over those 12 hours before letting go, I, found my value and found my life worth fighting for. And my life had been at the requirements of everybody all my life, and at the say so of everybody. So even though the doctors were right, I saw the scans, I saw the tests, I knew exactly what's happening, I could see and feel what was happening to my body. I just thought, no, I'm not going. This is my last chance. This is it.
Yeah.
I am worth fighting for. And so in that moment, I came back, and I came back through the rattle in my throat. And I had a lovely nurse taking my time of death. And she couldn't believe that I was there and I'd come back. And I just remember the conversation. I had so much verbal energy about what had just happened. And I felt super connected to everything and everyone on the ward,
Wow.
and so intuitive and in love with life. And I knew at that point life was, if I was to come through and remain in the state I was, that life would never be the same again. Never.
And has it been the same?
No.
Okay. Well, we're going to
I
talk
refer
more
to that.
about how this has impacted your life and how you're now making an impact with others as well. But I do want, and we're going to go into a break here in a couple minutes, but I mean, if you really think about all of this, what I got out of what you just told me is it's when you surrendered, when you totally let go and surrendered and released, just surrendered, that the miracle appeared. Like that this voice, this force, whatever made you like transform your thinking, it
Mm,
was when you let go. And I think
yes.
that there's such a message in that, because we always say in, our healing journey and when we're coaching and we're helping, and we have to learn to let go. And that's when we can step into this state of allowance. And it
Right.
just
Yeah.
sounds like that's what really happened. You
Mm,
really totally let go. And like,
mm,
hey, just take me, I'm letting go. And even though you were able to see all those things before your eyes and all the clarity, you still let go, and yet you were given this chance, and you do feel that you made this chance, this
yeah.
choice. Right. Okay,
Yeah.
good. We're going to talk more about this extraordinary story with this extraordinary woman, and we're going to take a short break, and we will be back right after this.
Welcome back to Up Close and Empowered with Sonna Johns. Have a question for Sonna or guests? Join us on the show at 888-346-9141. That's 888-346-9141. Now back to the show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. We're talking to Jessie Rose about her life-changing experience. And right before the break, we were talking about the moments that, she was going through this, I don't even know what you'd call it, transformational process, clarity. You said that may have lasted 12 hours or so. I'm really curious if you remember like a lot of it. Do you remember most of it? And if so, were there some highlights of like clarity, like epiphanies that really came through in those moments?
Yeah. For me, mainly it's the lessons, realizing that I'd never been there for myself, or never been allowed to have boundaries.
Hmm.
And so, because I needed to be a certain way, because that served other people, and the sadness of that, and the abandonment of that, and the self-abandonment in that as well. And I really felt the suffering in that, and the preciousness of my value in that. And so I think I realized, I think I did, if you're not being true to yourself, you're not being true to anybody. And if people put you in that position, they're not worth being in your life, and
Mhm.
life is extraordinarily precious and a gift. And we only get it once. And you need to live it your way, being true to yourself. Otherwise, whose life are you living?
Right.
And when you're not living your own life, you are walking someone else's path for somebody else. And that creates such dis-ease in your body, to the point of disease, perhaps,
Mhm. You had to learn
and
the
I,
hard way. You learned the hard way, although it was a beautiful way if you think about it. I mean, we can always reframe it and look at the beauty in it, and that it was very divine how this all happened. But and the lesson was really that you didn't listen to your intuition. You didn't listen to your voice. You were
yeah,
somewhat pressured and coerced into the situation, even though you were told it could be a detriment to your health
mm, yeah, again, to please others.
to please others. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, I mean, there's so many people that I'm sure can relate, men and women, that can relate to being pressured and not being able to say no in certain situations, and then stepping into the self-betrayal. And as you
Yeah.
said, it can lead to illness. It can lead to
Yeah.
physical things. And not everybody realizes that, but over time, that stress and that going against your inner guidance and your inner will, if you will
Mm,
add up to be some type of illness in your body over time.
yeah.
And that's why it's
Yeah.
so important to listen.
It is. And in any way, if we're not being not being ourselves, that's the ultimate self-betrayal, isn't it? But also, if we're not happy, how can anyone else around us be happy anyway? This whole, if you're not being true to yourself, you're not being true to anybody. And what we are within ourselves, we pass down and around to everybody around us. So you may as well
Mhm.
be being true to yourself and making sure you're happy. Do you know what I mean? For those who
Exactly.
really
No,
struggle with that
totally know what you mean.
concept.
One of the
Mm.
things I wanted to ask you, Jesse, is, after this experience happened, were you thinking to yourself, wow, what just happened? Like, did you know what you had just gone through? Like, what were you thinking at the time that all of this happened?
Well, I wasn't thinking during that process. It was just happening. It wasn't till afterwards was
Right.
fascinated, and looked back to try and work out what had happened, and was speaking with the nurse about it.
Right. Well,
And
that's what I meant.
so,
After it happened, what were you thinking? Like, oh my gosh, what just happened? What did I just experience?
yeah, I experienced it. Yeah, the near death experience, but I just experienced a chance of a new life, and grabbing that by the horns, and going for it. And the nurse said, that was, I don't know why you're here. And she said that was so close. And and she just looked at me. We just started talking about life and relationships, and it was just
Mhm.
I was just swept up in the moment and felt incredible, actually. But obviously I
Mm.
wasn't out of the dark, because it almost happened again 3 days later. So
Oh,
yeah.
what
Yeah.
happened? Tell us about that.
So I actually, after that happened, the near death experience, I pleaded to have all the operations they wanted to give me. And I, because I was worth it. I
Right.
felt like, yeah, now or never. And they
Right.
actually said it's too late. There's no chance of your survival if we did that. So I just said, well, I want to die trying. And they said, Jesse, that's already happened. We're not going to do it. And I said, please do it. And I want it now. So within a moment, I was being prepared to have an operation. Went down the next day, and no, the next hour, sorry, and went down, and was put to sleep. And it was a very long operation, very messy. I've got liver damage as a result of it, and there was a lot of mess inside and sucking out a lot of mess. But during that time, I was awake as well, and they hadn't given me any pain relief. So I was having a lot of my insides removed with no pain relief and being wide awake. So it was quite a trauma.
Oh my
It
gosh.
was crazy. And then afterwards, in recovery, I had been awake for an hour with no pain relief still, and I felt like my back was breaking. It was the most amazing pain, and I'd had a lot of my insides removed. And so they came and gave me a block, which was a tube
Right.
into my spinal cord, but they put it too high so that it just covered my chest, so I couldn't feel myself breathing. And so I was put up into the ward, pinned up to the bed forward to try and bring the block down so it'd cover the pain. So I didn't have any pain relief really. It was just still
Oh
stuck
my
here at my
gosh.
chest. And my body started leaking out. So I was only about 4.5 stone underneath all this fluid. And I was actually big and fat, if you like, the fluid, because my body was leaking out. My organs were failing again.
Wow.
And my surgeon came up to my bedside and said, pulled the trolley with the tray on it across my bed, and he just said, "You're not walking out of here in 3 days' time unless you try having these protein drinks, Ensure, whatever they're called, I can't remember." And he just said, "You need to stay awake for at least 3 nights, sipping constantly and absorbing it."
Uh,
So, and I don't quite understand, but he said that my body proteins are leaking out because my organs aren't processing anything. So I took all the tubes out,
hmm.
because I was retaining all the fluid and body wasn't doing what it needed
Right.
to do to cope with that. And they just said, "There's nothing more we can do for you." And so I did stay awake for 3 nights. I didn't want to die. And I was sipping, and there's hardly any room. And I still had fluid on my lungs. So breathing every breath was a fearful fight. I had to, every moment and every breath, had to surrender and accept the situation, which allowed me emotional recovery in some way, which allowed me the resilience to keep going and fighting for every breath, and not knowing what the outcome was going to be, and have to do this 3 nights, staying awake, hallucinating,
Wow.
screaming and frightening the whole ward with my hallucinations, and sipping this protein. And after 3 days of staying awake, I mean, he was right, it was amazing, and my body had reabsorbed the proteins, and I'd made it
Wow.
again.
That is just like, I have total chills just listening to this. I mean, like you're willing to do this knowing that you could die, and they're saying, there's a good chance you're going to die, and you're like, no, do it anyway. I'll die trying. Like that
Mm-hmm.
in itself. Wow. I mean, so how do you feel that it's like in that moment, did you feel like, wow, like after you got through this the second time, did you feel like, okay, I'm ready to take the second chance at life? Like, did you have something come over you? Like something gave you a strong will though, because you were really fighting all the way through this. So something within you was very strong and you were not going to give up.
No, I wasn't. And the bit that made me not want to give up was that this is my last chance. This is my last chance to live life on my terms, and feeling and having empathy for suffering, not myself necessarily, but for human suffering,
Mhm.
and being stubborn and determined. But I've forgotten your question, Sona.
Well, no, I was just, I wondered if like something came over, how we get like the second chance and we feel more
Yeah,
energized and we've recalibrated and we're like, okay, now is my chance. I have the second chance at life. This is what I'm going to do. Like, did you have a moment like that? Like, how did your life transform into what you're doing now? Let's say, I mean, obviously there had to be some healing that took place, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, no is the answer to that. I didn't have that wonderful feeling because I was
Okay.
I was just trying to get through the next breath and the
Yep.
next breath and next breath.
Hmm.
And I got to a point where there wasn't anything else they could do to me for me. I was been in there for 3 months. And
Right.
so they just said, "You've got to go home now, and now's the hard part." because I had to learn to walk, talk, and breathe at the same time. I had complete muscle wastage.
Mm,
You know, I came out in a
mhm.
wheelchair, and I had to learn how to just exist on a normal daily basis. And that took 9 months to even, walk, talk, and breathe at the same time. So
Right.
life was a struggle. It was horrendous, actually.
Mhm.
And in all honesty, it took 15 years to fully recover. So I wasn't looking forward to, and this is my chance, if you know what I mean. That
Right.
was in
Mhm.
that moment of, I knew I was dying and I had the near death experience. It's like, no, this is it. Last chance. I'm going to do it.
Right. You
And
were
that
just
was all
holding on for your
instinctive.
life, basically. You were just trying to survive and get through this.
Yeah. Yes. And every action was instinctive. So I just, followed my
Right.
intuition and just went for it and kept on surrendering. But and that gave me the resilience and the helped me cope with the next strategy to
Right.
survive for the next one. But
Did you have a support system during this time? Did you have a strong support system, or did you feel like you were all alone, or did you have people that were there for you?
that was interesting. I mean, my partner at the time was there and my mother was there, but that was it. But wouldn't mind it if I was on my own. That was the thing.
Mm,
You are in such an amazing place of bliss, and you lose all connections, become something different, and I was seeing and feeling everything through love, and there was no dependency or anything. It was quite interesting, quite extraordinary. But the next part of my life was coping and getting well and continuing to heal, because even though you go through a massive life changing event like that, which changes you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, you still go back to, well, where there's a tendency, because you're surrounded by the same people, you're surrounded by the same life, but you've changed. And
right.
so it's hard not to be
Hmm.
swept back into old ways
Right.
of being. So it's a constant practice, if you
So
like.
tell us a little bit about that. And that has a lot to do with what you're doing now, because I know that you're a transformational coach. You help people that have gone through this type of thing and other type of traumatic experiences.
Mm.
So tell us a little bit more about what you were just saying. Like, you've changed, the people around you haven't. And what did that feel like? And how did you feel that you changed? Like, how did you feel that you were different? And how did you uh, cope with that? Like, how did you navigate through these changes?
Mm. I think first of all, being so ill and having so much wrong with you, you felt so different to everybody else. That was, I wasn't lonely, but I was alone in that. So
Hmm.
that was quite something to deal with. And yes, everyone was different, and I was different. Everyone's the same, but I was different. And I just, I couldn't live that life anymore, because I had my value. I knew I was worth living. Life was so precious, and I had such empathy. I know I keep saying it, for suffering, and it was not needed anymore. And so I was going to be true to myself, honor my boundaries, and live life on my terms for me. So when I was better and strong enough, I left that whole life and that whole
Wow.
situation to start again,
Wow.
feeling
So,
empowered and able and brand new, brand new. It's like that whole thing was like wiping the slate clean.
wow. And so I mean, what was the first step to completely stepping into that whole new life? What was the first thing that you did that that was different and you knew that you were stepping out into a completely different way of living?
So, gosh, there were so many things. So, first of all, I moved,
Mhm.
and I wanted to try things that I had never tried before. But still in my mind, I thought, as 14-year-old girl, I always wanted to help people and help people heal, because I intuitively could sense things with people. And that was a huge calling for me afterwards. And I thought, well, and I kept on trying to shop around, try different things. But more time went by, I was pulled back to that, because I learned a lot about myself and how to heal myself to the point of surviving. And I just thought, no, I need to share that with people and help people to, eliminate unnecessary suffering, so they can, live a more fulfilling life on their
Right.
terms. So I embarked on a journey to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and this can apply to so many things. I mean, obviously, not everybody goes through a near-death experience. However, what you've learned, I'm sure, can apply to many different things that people go through in their life. Heartache, loss, grief, trauma, all of those things. I mean, wouldn't you agree that a lot of the things that you did to heal are a lot of the things that you can actually help others with, even though
Yeah.
it isn't the same exact experience? Like,
Mm.
you have obviously the courage, the resilience, and the wisdom of going through such a difficult event in your life
Mm.
that can really allow you to help anybody in any kind of capacity that's traumatic.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So that's why you're a breakthrough transformational coach.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So we're going to hear a little bit more about that after the break, what you're working on, what your mission is, and how you like to inspire others, and what what your thoughts are on all of that based on your experiences in your life and everything that you've gone through. So we're going to take one more break, and we will be back right after this.
Welcome back to Up Close and Empowered with Sonna Johns. Have a question for Sonna or a guest? Join us on the show at 888-346-9141. That's 888-346-9141. Now back to the show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back as we're talking to Jessie Rose regarding a near-death experience that she had and how it's changed her life for the better. And she's going to talk about, I really want to know a little bit about the process of how she healed and how this led her to being a coach today, and her mission being to help others that have gone through, significant events, life-changing events in their life. So can you tell us a little bit about what that healing process was like? I know you said 15 years. So, in that 15 years, what are some of the highlights that you learned, and how did it lead you to becoming a transformative coach today?
I guess to shorten it and say it quickly is we have all the answers within us to heal ourselves. Everything that we need to understand is within ourselves, and that's something that I learned during that 12-hour period. I wasn't thinking or analyzing; I was just being, because I had no other way and no other choice. And wisdom was just coming up. Things were just coming up in clarity, and clarity was understanding, and understanding was healing. And so I applied that to my life constantly. I always do. It's a constant practice, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what I help my clients with. So it was constantly surrendering, constantly allowing, and in that is self-mastery, because you get to learn everything about yourself, and everything that happens to us in life and traumas, we store it in our bodies. And and we create these crazy patterns based on beliefs because of these things that have happened to us, which sabotage our lives. And so I help people now to access that wisdom in their bodies, and and to reveal and to unlock their more human potential and ultimate human potential for more fulfilling life. It's less about therapeutic talking, it's more about accessing that wisdom in our
Right.
bodies for physical healing, mental healing, emotional healing, and for
What
better
if it's someone,
relationship.
what if it's someone that doesn't trust themselves? What would you do? Like, if somebody does struggle to listen to their intuition or their inner guidance, how would you guide them? What would be one of the first things that you would help them with?
First of all, I think someone who doesn't trust themselves, being taught it's not safe to trust themselves, or something's happened where they suddenly didn't trust themselves, so they're outside of themselves. So they're not going to be able to access those feelings, or where that come from, or why, or trust their instincts, intuition, or anything about themselves. So I help them to safely get inside their body, getting into a meta state through breath work, so it feels safe to be in their body. And I take them through a sequence where I can calibrate where they are within their physiology just by looking at them here, even on a Zoom call, not necessarily in person, and help safely guide them to that block, that thing that
Mm-hmm.
happened,
Mm-hmm.
to where it is, so it's immediate in its results, and it quickly but safely gets them to where they need to be to release that block by understanding it. And they find themselves through that process, which releases them, and it gives them access to their physical wisdom, which
Right.
is the higher consciousness and higher ways of being. in
Right,
doing.
being able to access their intuition.
Mm.
You talk
Mm.
about, oh, where's it at here? You talk about unlocking untapped physical intelligences. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that was something that happened during the process of my near death experience. And then afterwards, I found some amazing modalities that complement that. I mean, they've always been there, but which was amazing. So I help people with that. So I use core process psychotherapy, which is about presence and listening to the body's wisdom. And another thing called MBIT coaching, which is science has helped us understand, and it's backed by science now, that our gut, reproductive organs, our heart, all have the same chemical warehouse and neurological network as our brains do, but they work independently from each other and from our brain, but they have their own prime functions. So they have their own experience to your external reality. So unless we're in alignment with those, and there's a lot of information and a lot of wisdom that we're cut off from, that it gives us more potential in life and more fulfillment. So if we're walking around unconscious and not being able to access that or not even know we have them, then we're not going to live a life fulfilled. We're not going to understand ourselves, know ourselves, or have that wonderful relationship. So I help people to access and unlock the information in that physical wisdom, and that helps them to realize, know themselves, self-master themselves in relationships, release impediments to their physical health, create spiritual freedom, increase their performance, because we have, traumas that impair our performance. So
Mhm.
heal that, release that, and be in charge of ourselves and be more intuitively led. And yeah, and it releases your unlimited human potential and high levels of consciousness and being and doing. Life
Mhm.
is very different. It's very immediate in results, and it's long lasting, and it teaches you to be your own therapist too, because you constantly have access to that, and you can help those around you to do the same too from that
Right.
learning.
Life is precious for sure. And,
Mm.
not everybody understands that they can access this. So I think sometimes people just have to be at a point where they're willing to, or there has to be some type of life-changing experience, or it could be even a breakup. It could be a very destructive
Mm.
relationship. It could be a death. It could be an illness. It could be many, many things that
Mm.
sometimes, unfortunately, it is what leads people to really go deep within to discover who they are.
It
And,
does.
it's something that people have to be ready for. And sometimes they don't have a choice. If something does major happen, like let's say something like yourself, I mean, it just kind of happened organically. Like this was obviously very like divine in its own way. I mean, you weren't listening, as you had mentioned. You didn't listen to your wisdom. You didn't know how to say no in your relationship. And you just kind of, were people pleasing. And, I know we overuse that word a little bit, but it's true. We don't want to ruffle any feathers. We don't want to rock any boats. So we just do whatever
Mm.
to not upset anybody at our own
Mm.
expense.
Mm.
And then it can
That's
show
right.
up in many different ways: psychological, emotional, physical illness, and
Mm.
impacting our life. So, with all of this that you've learned, Jessie, what do you think is the biggest thing you've gotten out of this whole, these 15 years, this journey that you've been on, and now being a coach, helping other people that go through similar challenges? What do you think is the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway, like that you could tell the world right now?
For me, I think it's being true to yourself. Everyone says all there is love and everything comes back down to love, but I
Mhm.
disagree to a certain extent. It's being true to yourself in itself is an act of love,
Yes.
and so many of us are walking around unconscious and not living a fulfilled life and existing or, dissatisfied. And I think don't wait for something awful to happen to change your life. Do it now, because this life happens once that we know of, that we remember, and that this is your chance to live that fulfilled life. And you can, and to be brave enough to take the chance to live your life on your terms, in your way, because it will benefit everyone around you anyway. And if it doesn't, and
Mhm.
people want to take that away from you, then it's time to remove yourself from those situations, because they're not for you. and they just want to take from you. So I think always stand in your strength, learn about who you are, and yeah, and just be true to yourself. It is everything. It was everything for me anyway.
Right. No, I agree 100%. That's beautiful. Those are some beautiful words of wisdom for sure. And as you said, as we heal everyone around us. As we transform, as we awaken, everybody around us does, our loved ones, our friends, and other people that were even around. I mean, there is a ripple effect of us doing the healing, doing our inner work, and really awakening to our true power, which, I'm all about. Obviously, that's the name of the show, is like really awaken
Yeah.
to your true power, because we all have it within us. And like you said, it shouldn't take a life-changing experience. I mean, sometimes that's the way it goes. We learn from the
Absolutely.
heartache. We learn from the pain. We learn from the disappointment, the trauma, the betrayal, the deception. We learn from all of that. So I
Yeah.
think to a certain degree we have to learn, but I understand what you're saying. Like, don't wait for something major to happen to really take control of your life, because we can take control of our life right now, meaning that we can create the life that we want by tapping into our inner power, our intuition, being true to ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
And it's our happiness is our birthright, not a luxury, is it?
For sure. For sure.
Mm.
So do you have a specific program that you take people through? How can people get in touch with you? Like, what is the best way for them to reach out to you and even communicate if they had a question about a near-death experience, or, wanted to connect with you? What is the best way for them to connect with Jessie Rose?
I find mostly people DM me on Instagram. So that's
Okay.
my main place of contact for people. And I'm running a course, a new one called Self Mastery, which is all about the process I went through, which incorporates all the modalities I use to heal relationship with self, for better relationships, for better health, for better performance, and for a fulfilling life. It's my new signature course. But people can reach out to me on Instagram at Jessie lower score
Right,
Rose
the underscore.
Coaching.
Yeah, Jessie
Underscore, that's
underscore
it. Sorry.
Rose. I want to make
Yeah.
sure, because sometimes it is hard to find people when they have some underscores or some other things in their name. But
Yeah. Sorry, it's a
Jessie,
complicated one.
JESSIE underscore
Yeah.
Rose, right?
Coaching.
Coaching. Okay, Jessie Rose
Yeah.
Coaching. Okay, so that's the best way
Yeah.
to reach out. Okay, great. And I am just going to thank everybody for listening today. I mean, this is truly a remarkable story, and the fact that you have gone through this for 15 years and then some is, you really can't put a price, or you can't even measure the amount of wisdom you've gained, like
Mm.
pain, I'm sure, courage, disappointment. Like, I'm sure you know the meaning of persevering. I mean, you were willing to die just to take this treatment. Like, you were just, and I think one of the main things that I really got out of this today with you, Jessie, is surrender. I mean, that is so true,
Yeah.
just to surrender.
Yeah.
And we get so caught up in controlling and expectations and wanting the outcome. And
Mm.
it's different. I always try to tell people, you don't have to have these expectations of specific goals, but you have to have something obviously to thrive for. But you can't identify with these things where you're caught up in that. It's when we truly surrender, like you did, when you surrendered in that moment, and you knew, like, look, whatever is meant to be, whatever's going to happen, I just surrender, right?
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's just such a
Absolutely.
strong message in that. If we all just surrender a little bit and just trust and allow and listen to our own
Mm.
intuition, that things
Yeah.
will work out. And right, it's that
Yeah.
trust,
Yeah.
for sure. And
Yeah.
you are a true testament to that, for sure.
Bless you.
So I want to thank everybody today for listening to this extraordinary story. Jessie, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. I'm honored to have you here on the show. And like, I
Thank you
wish
for
you the
having me.
very, very best in any way that I could help and support you. I am there for you too. And I
Thank
want
you.
to also say that next week, I have a really interesting show coming up with someone who's an expert on doing like shadow work. Okay. So, really doing some deep inner work, what the shadow side of our personalities and really getting to know ourselves. But she also has a gift for astrology, and she has a very interesting and exciting forecast for 2024. So, she's going to be sharing that with us as well. So, that will be next week on the show. And I would love to hear from all of you. And for those that would like to see how we may be able to work together or just to get your feedback, please reach out to sonnalife.com, contact me through there, or go on my Instagram at @SonnaLifeCoach. And I want to thank you all again for listening to the show, and have a great week. Thank you so much.